so I will get started. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sarah Burhow. I work in public relations for the Parks and Trails Division at DNR, and we're really glad you joined us today to talk about the fall color season. So first of all, before we get started, I'm going to record this so we can share it with folks who are not able to attend today. All right. Just to give you a little lay of the land, we'll start with some information that is shared by Brian Schwingle. He is a forest health specialist in the forestry division here at DNR. So he'll give you some information about what we might expect this fall color season. And then I'll share some information about recreation during the fall color season and give you some ideas of where to follow the fall colors and get outside and enjoy them. Then we'll have a Q&A session. So if you would like to ask a question, feel free to pop it into the chat at any time that you think of the question, and we'll get it to it when we open up Q&A. And then once we get to that point too, you can also raise your hand or just unmute yourself at that point and ask a question. So with that, I will pass it over to Brian.
Well, thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. I'm the Forest Health Program Coordinator for the Minnesota DNR. And I guess maybe I'll just start off with a little bit of leaf fall color change 101, some basic science. So decreasing day length is by far and away the major controller of when trees change fall colors. More so than any other variable, like more so than precipitation or anything like that. It's all about decreasing day length. And when the days start getting shorter, trees stop producing chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is the green pigment that we all see when we look at leaves and needles. And when trees stop producing chlorophyll, sunlight actually starts breaking it down, and what's revealed are the yellow and the orange pigments that are always there under, like in the leaf, but you just can't see them because there's so much green pigment. So the sunlight breaks down the chlorophyll, the green pigment, and what's revealed are the yellows and the oranges that we recognize as fall colors. There's one more pigment. There's a group of pigments called anthocyanins, and those are the brilliant reds and purples that some tree species produce. And actually, those anthocyanins are produced in typically the early fall, and they're produced from the sugars that still are being made by the tree by photosynthesis in the chlorophyll. And those sugars kind of get trapped and they back up in the leaf during the fall anatomical leaf change process. They get backed up, and certain trees convert those sugars to the anthocyanins, the reds and purples that we all love to see in the fall. So that's kind of the very basic science of fall leaf color change. So like I said, decreasing day length is by far and away the major controller of fall colors, timing of fall colors. And that's why the DNR's typical fall color map is quite reliable. In fact, in the last 5 autumns, peak fall colors have occurred within the 2-week time frames that you'll see in our fall color map. So it's really reliable. It's looking like over time, because of a warming trend in the fall, the peak is showing up in the middle point or the latter half of that 2-week peak fall color time frame. And that's been the case for the last 5 autumns. This year, of course, there are other weather variables that can subtly alter the brilliance of fall colors or the precise timing of fall colors. And this year, I think the big story weather-wise is abundant precipitation. when we take a look at the amount of precipitation that fell in Minnesota statewide from April through July, it was the second highest total in the modern record, going back to 1895 about. And that's that's great. That's great news because our forests have suffered recently from severe droughts, and it takes a few years for forests to recover from severe droughts. So we desperately needed a lot of rain. Um, there's a little catch though. When our forests and our trees experience much higher than normal precipitation levels in the spring and the summer, that sets up a perfect condition for fungal leaf diseases. And so we saw a lot of fungal leaf diseases on a number of tree species this year. You may have noticed crab apples in your neighborhood that were possibly missing over half of their leaves by mid-July. That was due to a fungal leaf disease. But in terms of fall colors, these fungal leaf diseases really won't have a major impact except for on some aspens. Clumps of aspens throughout Minnesota um, got a lot of leaf disease. And those leaf diseases caused aspen crowns, their canopies, to look very thin. They had stunted leaves. Many of their leaves right now are like a golden brown or even brown. And in fact, if you drive up north, you'll notice that there are patches of aspens along the roadways that are probably missing over 70% of their leaves. So the all these abundant rains cause a lot of fungal leaf diseases. In terms of fall colors, that'll subtly diminish the yellows across the entire landscape, subtly. Some aspens are unaffected though. And again, we needed these rains, and as tree diseases go, or as things go that damage our forests, leaf diseases are about the least problematic. They're typically just an aesthetic problem. They're an aesthetic issue. So we were very happy that we got all these rains. And I think, Sarah, that's all I got for now.
All right, thanks, Brian. I'll move on to share some information about where to get fall color updates throughout the season and then some recreation tips before we move on to that Q&A. The fall color map that the DNR puts together that Brian mentioned earlier can be found at the DNR website at mndnr.gov/fall color. It's all one word. We have staff at the Minnesota State Parks across the state who report in the fall colors for us. And they do so at least once each week during the fall season. As we get closer to the peak season, many of them are reporting multiple times a week. So that's a great spot to look and see what is happening and what you might see if you're going to plan a weekend trip to get out and enjoy the colors. The website does include a photo gallery and a page for each of the state parks. And those photos come from our park staff as well as from the public. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. One thing that we're really excited about this year to add to our fall color webpage is a date slider. This, I think, will be a fun tool for folks. It allows people to go backward or forward in time. So if you're looking at today's date or any earlier date, you're going to see the reported data for this year. If you slide that forward to a future date, what you'll see is historical data going back to 2013 that shows us what typical colors are like in the fall. So it's a great way to look at what things will potentially look like a few weeks down the road if you're looking to plan a trip further down into the fall color season. And then back to those photo galleries that appear on that page. The public can participate in that. We have a photo sharing option that's right there on that fall colors page. So people who go out and make a trip and take some photos can share them with us. If they go to a state park, a state trail, a recreation area, a forest, And then we can share those photos with the public. They'll show up in photo galleries, and they might even be used on DNR social media channels. So that's kind of fun. Another tool we have to help people in planning a fall colors outing is our Fall Colors Update newsletter. You can subscribe to this on the Fall Color Finder webpage. And we send a weekly alert starting, we'll start next Thursday on September 12th, and that'll go every Thursday afternoon through the fall color season, through the end of October. And these newsletters feature some photos that can show you what the fall colors are looking like in different locations. Have some tips on places that would be good to visit that week. We share some information about the recreation opportunities that are available. And new this year, we've got some fun contributions from some state park visitors. Now, in deciding where to go, we have a lot of options to get outside and enjoy the fall colors and state lands. We have 64 state parks and 9 state recreation areas. We have many, many miles of state trails. There are 59 state forests and 169 scientific and natural areas. So there's really a wide variety of places that people can go, from the very busy and full of people to a few spots that are some more quiet options where the solitude seekers might like to enjoy the fall colors. And in terms of recreation, there's really something for everybody, from people who are looking to just take a drive or relax and enjoy the scenery. We have lots of places to do that. Um, we've also got recreation opportunities for people who really want to get the adrenaline pumping. If you want to go on a rigorous hike or mountain bike ride, we've got those things too. And the DNR website is a really good place to start and learn about all the recreation options that are available. I also like to give a little plug for the prairies in Minnesota. Sometimes we focus fall colors very much on the forests and trees. Another kind of fall colors is the wildflowers and grasses that also change color in the fall. So especially in the early part of the fall color season where we're not seeing as much leaf change on the trees yet, think about heading to a prairie. Those are great for early in the season. Camping options. We have camping options in state parks, recreation areas, and state forests that are open into the fall. If you're planning to go to a state park or recreation area, you might want to check that park's website and look for seasonal updates. That will tell you how late into the fall season that campground is going to be open. And you can make a reservation for those campgrounds at mndnr.gov/reservations, or you can call the reservation line. That's 866-857-2757. Well, it is fairly easy to find a campsite reservation during the week in the fall. Camping on weekends in the fall is still very popular. So if you'd like to go to a state park or recreation area to camp in the fall and you don't have a reservation yet, we recommend you go ahead and do that as soon as you can. And another great option for fall camping is state forest campgrounds. There are 48 of them. And what is great about those is they're good for last minute planners. They're still beautiful. You're going to enjoy the fall colors. You really immerse yourselves in fall colors in a state forest campground. There are no reservations for those campgrounds. They are first come, first serve. So if you decide right before the weekend that you want to head out and camp for the weekend, this is a great option for you. And then just a few other tips to go through. For people looking to go to a state park or recreation area, you'll need a vehicle permit for that. It's $7 for one day, or a full year is $35. And the full year pass is good for 12 months from when you buy it. So don't worry if you buy it in September or October, it will not expire in December at the end of 2024. It will be good for 12 months. And also want to note that some state parks are really busy on the weekend. So if you're planning to head out, you might want to arrive early for the best parking options. But then we have lots of places that do not require a vehicle permit too. You don't need a permit to go to state trails or to state forests or those scientific and natural areas. However, if you are using horse trails or motorized recreation trails, you'll need to have your off-highway vehicle registered or have a horse pass. So those are things to check out before you go. We do recommend that you check the DNR website and look for visitor alerts or any other notices or road closure alerts before you head out, just so you're aware of anything that might impact your trip. And then last but not least, we want to make sure that everybody has fun and a positive, great experience when they go out. So safety first. Make sure you check the weather forecast before you go. And remember when planning what kind of clothing and footwear that you have, that the weather can change a lot throughout the day in the fall with cooler mornings and evenings, but really warm afternoons. So bring some layers and make sure you have plenty of water and food for all the people and pets in your party. And so you're prepared to have a great day. That wraps up our kind of recreation portion here. So we can move into questions and answers. If anyone has a question, feel free to pop it in the chat, or you can unmute, ask a question, or you can raise your hand. Go ahead, Judith.
Hi, so I was just wondering if you guys noticed during this like fall color season if there was kind of like an uptick in people visiting the state parks and state forests.
Sure. So fall had typically been kind of a shoulder season for us, but we have seen a lot of increase in visitation in those shoulder seasons in, the spring and into the fall. June, July, and August have always been really busy months at state parks, but the April, May, September, and October have grown significantly in visitors in recent years. And we have some data showing that there's pretty significant increase in those shoulder months in the last 4 to 5 years. So it is becoming more popular. Like I said, parks are very busy on fall weekends. And we still have lots of campers on fall weekends. So we're happy to have all those visitors. I love it, but it is much busier in the fall than it had been years ago. Brian, do you want to take Tori's question from the chat to talk a little bit more about the forecast and how a warmer than average September might impact fall colors?
Sure, Tori. So, warmer than average September generally would mean that the peak fall colors would happen a little later in that 2-week time frame. Again, in the last 5 autumns, when September has been really warm, generally, fall colors have peaked in the latter half of the time frame in the typical fall color map. Last year was a particularly warm September, and that seemed to have not only slightly delayed the peak fall color, but also made the total time at which the forest was at peak shorter. And that's generally known to be the case. If it's really, really warm, it's going to delay fall color peak, but when they're peaking, there's not going to be at quite as much time to view that peak color.
The next question in the chat might be a good follow-up to that one.
Yeah.
Based on the weather that we've seen this summer, are we expecting early, late, or average fall color season?
That's a great question. What's really interesting is that, in the last many years, Minnesota has seen significant droughts. We've also seen significant rains, like precipitation over the course of the growing season that's way above average, and in different years, precipitation that's way below average. And we have not seen a clear link to the timing of fall colors with those weather events. It really seems to be more closely reliant on temperature, particularly in September. And so I'm afraid um, it's just too early to be able to say whether it's going to be an early, late, or average fall color season. I like to look at historical data, and again, in the last 5 years, or in the last 5 falls, the peak fall colors have been right in the middle. They've occurred right in the middle of that 2-week time frame in our typical fall color map, or they've occurred in the latter half of that.
The next question from Adam phases in really nicely from that one too. Talk about how tricky it is to make a forecast.
So actually, making a fall color forecast isn't that difficult, because fall colors, by far and away, they are most dependent on decreasing day length. And of course, day length doesn't shift. It's not a weather thing. It's the same every year. And so that's why the fall color map is quite reliable. Now, in terms of making a super precise fall color forecast, it's the opposite. It's nearly impossible. Um, if you look at kind of the longer range forecasts and you see a frost that's perhaps in the first half of September, that would indicate that fall colors are going to peak a little earlier than, like, in the early half of that 2-week time frame in our fall colors map. In 2020, 2000 in the last 5 autumns, the we only experienced a frost in the first half of September in the northern half of the state in 1 year, in 2020. And that year was the earliest peak in the last 5 autumns. And the peak fall colors happened about roughly 2 weeks after that fall frost. That occurred again in the first half of September.
Right, I can take the next question about getting data from state parks about fall colors. There are lots of places where we could collect data about fall color change, but we've got staff, we have naturalists at many of our parks who are out there and in the midst of the trees every day and really paying attention to what they look like on a daily basis and noticing how they change over time. So those are people who are really great to report in what they're seeing to us. And we have an easy app that they do that, where they can report in. And because we have those 73 state parks and recreation areas, we're getting reports really from all over the state. There are several pockets of the state where our parks and recreation areas are clustered a little more closely together, but we're really getting a good look across our whole state when we have our state park staff making those reports. So that's a great reason to use them as a resource in collecting this information. Are there any other questions? Give it a few more seconds of awkward silence to make sure there aren't any other questions before we wrap up for the day. All right, Adam's got a question there. That looks like one for you, Brian. Adam has asked in the chance, do big temperature swings make a difference?
Big temperature changes do make a difference. I believe they actually speed up the leaf color change process. So yes, big temperature changes would make a difference, a subtle difference again, in terms of how fall progresses. Again, the major driver is day length. I will add that different tree species respond differently to day length and temperature. So for example, sugar maples, which I'm biased, they're perhaps the prettiest fall color tree, or one of them. Let's just say one of them. Sugar maple doesn't rely hardly at all on temperature. It's almost exclusively changes color in response to decreasing day length. In great contrast, our oak species, they're a lot more affected by temperature. Again, day length is still the primary driver for leaf color change in our oak species, but relative to sugar maple, oaks are more affected by temperature. So, for example, if we had a really warm fall, sugar maples would peak, they would produce their peak colors at about the same time as if we had a kind of a cold fall, whereas oaks would be delayed in terms of when they peak with the warmer fall.
Have any other questions? Great. It looks like we don't have any other questions, so we'll wrap up.